It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Tom, my once sweet and attentive boyfriend, began to change the ambiance of my cozy, sunlit apartment. His actions seemed harmless at first, a mirror here, a reflective surface there, but soon his fixation grew into something unsettling. I can still feel the unease that crept over me the day he hung the first mirror. It was a large, ornate thing, its frame carved with intricate designs that seemed to dance in the shifting light. "It's so I can always be with you," Tom said, his voice a disturbing blend of tenderness and obsession. I tried to smile, to see it as a quirky expression of his love, but a cold shiver ran down my spine. As days slipped into weeks, more mirrors appeared. Each room began to feel less like parts of my home and more like stages in a bizarre play. The mirrors, with their glistening surfaces, seemed to watch me, their reflections twisting my familiar surroundings into something alien and menacing. I'd catch glimpses of myself, my face growing more haggard and tired, eyes wide with a dawning realization of the trap being set around me. Tom's transformation was equally alarming. The man I once knew, who'd laugh and dance around the kitchen with me, was now often silent, his gaze distant and fixated. Sometimes I'd find him staring into the mirrors, whispering words I couldn't hear, as if communicating with a world beyond my reach. The mirrors weren't just decorations, they were sentinels, his eyes and ears in my once safe haven. When he was away, his absence was as oppressive as his presence. I felt his eyes on me, tracking my every move through the cold, unblinking reflections. His obsession with watching me, with ensuring I was always in sight, turned my sanctuary into a prison. My home, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with the silent whispers of my growing fears. The descent into my own eerie, mirrored world began with a small, unnerving incident. It was a cold, misty evening, the kind where the world seems to retreat into a hush, as if holding its breath. I was alone, the apartment cloaked in silence, save for the soft patter of rain against the windows. As I passed by the living room mirror, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. Tom's reflection standing behind me, even though he was at work miles away. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing, just the empty room and the sound of my own ragged breathing. This was just the beginning. His reflections started appearing more frequently, each instance more disturbing than the last. I would see him in the kitchen mirror, watching me as I made coffee, or in the bathroom, his gaze following me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. His eyes, once filled with warmth and affection, now held a chilling emptiness, a void that seemed to suck in the light around him. Sleep became a distant memory. At night, I would lie awake, the soft glow of the streetlights casting eerie shadows across the room. The mirrors reflected back a world that was both familiar and utterly alien. Sometimes I would see him moving in the mirrors, a silent, ghostly presence that never quite seemed to be part of my reality. The worst part was the uncertainty. Was this some trick of the mind, a manifestation of my own fears and anxieties? Or had Tom found some unnatural way to breach the boundaries of our world? The thought of him somehow watching me, always there in the reflections, turned my home into a maze of paranoia and dread. I started avoiding the mirrors, covering them with sheets, but it was no use. His image would find its way through the smallest sliver of uncovered glass, his silent watchfulness a constant reminder of the prison he had created for me. The night I decided to shatter the mirrors was one filled with a sense of ominous finality. A storm was brewing outside, its winds howling like the wails of lost souls, mirroring the turmoil within me. The apartment, once my sanctuary, had become a twisted labyrinth of glass and reflection, a prison crafted by Tom's unnerving obsession. Armed with a hammer, my hands trembling with a mix of fear and determination, I approached the first mirror. Its surface, once a portal to Tom's eerie surveillance, now reflected my own distorted image, a woman on the brink. With a cry that mingled anger and despair, I swung the hammer. The sound of shattering glass was like the breaking of chains, liberating yet terrifying. Room by room, I destroyed them all. Each strike was a blow against the invisible eyes that had haunted me. But with every mirror I shattered, the air grew colder, the atmosphere heavier. The shadows seemed to deepen, stretching across the walls like dark, grasping fingers. In the final room, I stood before the last mirror. This time Tom's reflection was different. It was contorted in a silent scream, his eyes pleading. Was this a trick of the mind, or something more sinister? I hesitated, the hammer raised, but the thought of perpetual surveillance pushed me over the edge. With a scream that echoed my inner torment, I brought the hammer down. The glass exploded into 1,000 pieces, but instead of relief, a wave of dread washed over me. A guttural, otherworldly scream filled the room, reverberating through the now mirrorless apartment. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a manifestation of unleashed fury. In the aftermath, as I stood amidst the shards of glass, a chilling realization dawned on me. The mirrors had been a barrier, a containment of sorts. In destroying them, I had not freed myself. I had unleashed something far more terrifying. The apartment was now devoid of reflections, but I felt an oppressive presence, a malevolent force that lurked in the shadows. Tom's obsession, it seemed, had transcended the physical realm. I had hoped to escape his gaze, but instead, I had invited it into a world without barriers, a world where it could manifest without constraint. I had always known that Alex was passionate, his love intense and sometimes overwhelming. His tall, lean frame and deep-set eyes, which once gazed at me with warm affection, had begun to take on a more manic, possessive glint. Our cozy two-bedroom apartment, once a haven of shared dreams and laughter, had slowly morphed into a stifling cage. It was during one of his long, unexplained absences that I stumbled upon his diary, hidden beneath the loose floorboard in our bedroom. The diary, a worn, leather-bound book with pages yellowed by time, held secrets far darker than I could have imagined. It detailed Alex's descent into the world of ancient alchemy and love potions, a desperate attempt to strengthen our bond. His words, scrawled in a frenzied hand, spoke of elixirs brewed in the dead of night, of chants whispered in forgotten languages. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The man I loved was dabbling in something sinister, something beyond the realm of sanity. As I pored over the diary, a chilling detail emerged. These potions, these elixirs of love, came with a dire cost. They were slowly transforming him, altering his very essence. I remembered the subtle changes I had noticed, the way his skin seemed to ripple in certain lights, his eyes reflecting an unnatural sheen, the strange, almost animalistic undertones in his voice. Fear coursed through me, a cold, unrelenting tide. I knew I had to leave, to escape the man who was becoming less human with each passing day. But as I planned my departure, I could feel his presence everywhere, his shadow looming over every moment of my waking life. The apartment, once filled with shared memories, now felt like a lair, housing something not quite human. The changes in Alex became more pronounced, more horrifying. His once handsome features were twisting, contorting into something grotesque. His skin took on a pallid, almost translucent quality, veins visible beneath the surface like dark, writhing serpents. His eyes, once a soft brown, were now a glaring, unnatural gold, flickering with a hunger that was no longer just emotional but primal, carnivorous. The apartment became a place of nightmarish surrealism. Shadows seemed to move of their own accord, the air heavy with an unspoken menace. Alex rarely spoke now, his words replaced by guttural sounds that chilled my blood. He would watch me for hours, his gaze unblinking, a predator stalking its prey. The man I had loved was disappearing, replaced by this creature that wore his skin, but shared none of his humanity. One evening, the horror reached its zenith. I awoke to find Alex crouched by the foot of our bed, his features barely recognizable. His fingers had elongated, nails transformed into sharp, claw-like appendages. He whispered in a voice that was a distorted echo of his own, words that were both a plea and a threat. His love, now a twisted, monstrous thing, sought not just my affection, but my very being. In a moment of terrifying clarity, I knew that I was not just fleeing a man, but a monster. A creature driven by an elixir-induced madness. A love that had decayed into a ravenous, unquenchable thirst. The apartment, our shared sanctuary, had become a grotesque tableau. A place where love had been corrupted into something unrecognizable, something deadly. The following days were a blur of terror and desperation. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, every step calculated to avoid provoking the creature that Alex had become. The once familiar rooms now felt alien and treacherous, filled with the echoes of a love that had turned into a nightmare. I gathered my essentials, my hands trembling as I planned my escape from this prison of twisted affection. The night I chose to leave, a storm raged outside, the thunder mirroring the chaos within me. As I crept through the darkened hallway, Alex's transformed figure loomed in the living room, his back to me, his body convulsing with unnatural spasms. I paused, my heart pounding in my ears, as I realized he was no longer just a man, but a hybrid of flesh and darkness, an abomination of his own making. As I reached the door, a guttural growl echoed through the apartment. Alex had sensed my departure. I ran, the sound of his inhuman pursuit a symphony of horror behind me. The once comforting streets were now a labyrinth leading me away from the nightmare I had lived. Leaving Mark was like trying to escape a dense fog that clung to every part of me. His presence, once comforting, had morphed into a suffocating blanket of control and paranoia. I remember packing my bags in our once shared apartment, a small, cluttered space that was filled with the remnants of our life together. Photos on the walls, his gadgets scattered on every surface, a constant reminder of his presence. Mark, with his sharp, angular features and piercing blue eyes, always had an intensity about him. But in recent months, his behavior became erratic, his mood swings more pronounced. The final straw came when I found hidden cameras in our bedroom. I confronted him, his face twisting into an unrecognizable mask of anger and desperation. "It's for your safety to keep you close," he'd said, his voice a chilling mix of concern and obsession. Moving to a new city felt like a breath of fresh air. My new apartment was a stark contrast to the old one, spacious, bright, with large windows overlooking the bustling street below. I thought I had left the past behind. I thought I was free. But then, the whispers started. At first I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, a residual effect of the stress. His voice, a deep baritone that once whispered sweet nothings, now intruded into my sanctuary, seeping out of my phone, my television, even my computer. It was always the same, a soft, menacing whisper, saying things only he would know, things meant to unsettle and control. I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was just a glitch, but deep down, I knew. Mark's expertise in technology, his knack for manipulating software and hardware, was now being used against me. My home, once a place of solace, had become a technological nightmare, every device a potential conduit for his haunting voice. The whispers grew more frequent, more insidious. I would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of his voice coming from my phone on the bedside table, telling me I couldn't escape him. The television would suddenly turn on, his voice echoing through the empty apartment, a cruel reminder of his pervasive presence. I began to unravel, the constant barrage of his voice making me question my reality, my sanity. Friends and family became distant memories, their calls and messages lost in the sea of Mark's technological torment. I stopped going out, afraid that any device I encountered would be another instrument of his harassment. The apartment, once bright and welcoming, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on me, the devices I once used for connection and entertainment, now sinister reminders of Mark's control. His voice was everywhere, a relentless echo that filled every corner of my space, every corner of my mind. In a moment of desperation, I destroyed every device, the television, the phone, the computer. But even in the silence that followed, I could hear him, a faint whisper in the back of my mind, a constant reminder that he was still there, still watching, still controlling.